When 7-year-old Emma arrives at school each day, something feels different about her. She's quieter than the other children, more distant, smaller somehow than she should be. And when Nurse Morrison notices Emma looking unwell during lunch one Thursday afternoon, a gentle conversation reveals a truth that will change everything. This is a story about vigilance, courage, and the power of speaking up when something isn't right. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The cafeteria at Riverside Elementary buzzed with the familiar energy of lunchtime on a Thursday afternoon in late October. 300 children filled the space with laughter and animated conversation. Plastic trays clattered against tables in an endless percussion, and the warm scent of chicken tenders and steamed vegetables drifted through the air. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows on the east wall, casting golden rectangles across the scuffed linoleum floor where years of children's feet had worn patterns into the surface. Third-grade teacher Mrs. Patricia Chen stood near the lunch line, a position she'd claimed every day for the past 15 years. From here, she could observe the entire cafeteria while appearing to simply monitor her own students. She'd learned over the years that the best teaching happened not just in the classroom, but in these unguarded moments when children thought no one was watching. She'd learned to read the social dynamics, to spot the lonely child, the bullied one, the one who needed an extra smile or word of encouragement. But lately, her attention kept returning to one particular child, and what she noticed filled her with growing concern. Mrs. Chen prided herself on knowing her students. She knew which ones came from homes filled with love and laughter, and which ones carried heavier burdens. She knew which children needed gentle encouragement, and which ones needed firm boundaries. She knew who struggled with reading, who excelled at math, who had trouble making friends, who was dealing with a divorce or a new sibling or a sick grandparent. But Emma Hartley had become something of a mystery to her, a concerning mystery. 7-year-old Emma Hartley sat at the end of table 6, her small frame seeming even smaller somehow against the bustling cafeteria backdrop. Emma had been in Mrs. Chen's class since September. It was now late October, and over those 2 months Mrs. Chen had watched the child change in ways that troubled her deeply. At the beginning of the school year, Emma had been quiet, but not withdrawn. She'd participated in class, raised her hand occasionally, smiled at the other children. She'd worn her dark hair in neat braids, and her school uniform had fit properly. She'd seemed like a normal 7-year-old adjusting to 3rd grade, perhaps a bit shy, perhaps still processing the loss of her mother 2 years earlier, but fundamentally okay. But something had shifted as the weeks progressed. Emma had grown quieter, more distant, more likely to sit alone during free time. She rarely raised her hand anymore. She'd stopped smiling. Her uniforms, which had fit at the start of school, now seemed to hang on her frame. The neat braids had given way to simple ponytails that looked hastily done, as if Emma had managed them herself without adult help. And there was something about her eyes, a hollowness, a wariness, that Mrs. Chen recognized from her early years teaching in an under-resourced district where some children came to school carrying burdens no child should carry. Mrs. Chen had mentioned her concerns to Emma's father during parent-teacher conferences 3 weeks ago. Robert Hartley had seemed like a nice man, if somewhat distracted. He'd apologized for Emma's declining participation, explaining that his new wife Melissa was still adjusting to being a stepmother, that Emma was still processing her grief, that they were working on it. He'd seemed genuinely concerned but also exhausted, mentioning work pressures and travel schedules. Mrs. Chen had left the conference feeling only partially reassured. Now, watching Emma in the cafeteria, all those concerns crystallized into something sharper, more urgent. "Emma, sweetheart, you should eat," Mrs. Chen said gently, approaching the table. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a soft glow, and Mrs. Chen noticed how pale Emma looked today, how the shadows under her eyes seemed deeper than usual. Emma looked up, her dark eyes wide in her delicate face. "I'm okay, Mrs. Chen." Her voice was barely audible over the surrounding chatter. Mrs. Chen crouched beside Emma's chair, noting how the girl's uniform seemed to hang loosely on her thin shoulders. "When did you have breakfast this morning?" Emma's gaze dropped to her lap. "I wasn't feeling hungry." The words felt fragile, like they might break if examined too closely. "Not hungry?" Growing girls need their energy. How about you try just a few bites? Emma reached for the chicken tender with trembling fingers, but as she lifted it toward her mouth, something shifted. Her eyes grew unfocused, the food slipped from her hand, and she swayed in her chair. Emma! Mrs. Chen caught the child before she could fall, alarmed by how cold Emma's skin felt. Someone get Nurse Morrison, now! The cafeteria shifted into concerned motion. Within seconds, Nurse Sarah Morrison pushed through the crowd, her emergency kit already in hand. She'd been a school nurse for 12 years, and the sight of Emma looking so unwell sent worry coursing through her. Let's lay her down gently, Sarah instructed, her voice calm and steady. Everyone give us some space, please. She knelt beside Emma, checking breathing and pulse. Both present, but Emma seemed so fragile, so far away. Sarah had worked at a children's hospital before becoming a school nurse, and something about this situation felt familiar and deeply concerning. Emma, can you hear me? Sarah gently touched the child's arm. Emma's eyelids fluttered. After what felt like an eternity but was only about 30 seconds, she opened her eyes, confusion swimming in their depths. You're okay, sweetie. You just felt faint. Can you tell me how you're feeling? Emma blinked slowly. Everything's spinny, like a carousel. Spinny. When was the last time you had a proper meal? Sarah asked, her professional instincts now heightened. Emma's brow furrowed as if trying to remember something very distant. Sunday evening, I think. We had pizza. Today is Thursday, Sarah said carefully. You're telling me it's been since Sunday? I'm not supposed to ask for more, Emma whispered, and tears began sliding down her cheeks. Melissa says it's not polite to ask. Sarah felt something shift inside her. She glanced up at Mrs. Chen, whose expression had grown serious. Around them, other teachers had quietly ushered students back to their classrooms, giving them privacy. But Principal Davidson now stood nearby, his face grave. Who's Melissa? Sarah asked gently. My stepmom. She says Sunday dinners are enough, that I need to learn to be grateful for what I have. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, as if reciting a lesson she'd memorized. Sarah's hands tightened before she consciously relaxed them. Emma, I'd like to take you to my office for a proper checkup. Is that all right? Emma nodded, trying to sit up. Will I be in trouble? Melissa says feeling unwell is just seeking attention. You won't be in trouble. I promise. Sarah helped Emma to her feet, but the child wavered unsteadily. Sarah ended up supporting her weight, concerned by how light Emma felt. In the nurse's office, Sarah settled Emma on the examination table. I'm going to check a few things, okay? Nothing uncomfortable. While Sarah worked, she kept up a gentle stream of conversation. Emma's vital signs revealed what Sarah had suspected. This was serious. Signs of insufficient nutrition were evident. Dull hair, pale skin, a look of weariness that no 7-year-old should carry. Emma, does your daddy know about the meal schedule at home? Emma shook her head quickly, worry flashing across her face. Melissa says Daddy works very hard and I shouldn't bother him with complaints. She says I'm lucky she married Daddy because I'm difficult, and no one else would want to help take care of me. Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd been a mandated reporter long enough to recognize when a child was in an unhealthy situation. This wasn't just household rules. This was something that needed immediate attention. I'm going to give you something to eat, but we'll start slowly since your system isn't used to regular meals. Too much at once might make you feel worse. Sarah retrieved crackers and a juice box from her supplies. Emma's eyes brightened at the sight of food, and she reached for the crackers with eager hands. Small bites, sweetheart. Nice and slow. Sarah watched as Emma forced herself to eat carefully, though it was clear she wanted more. While Emma ate, Sarah stepped to the corner of her office and pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed. This wasn't a situation she could handle alone. This child needed help. 911. What's your emergency? This is Sarah Morrison, school nurse at Riverside Elementary. I have a 7-year-old student who became unwell due to inadequate nutrition at home. She's disclosed concerning conditions involving her stepmother. I need medical assistance and police support immediately." As Sarah provided the details, Emma sat on the examination table, slowly eating crackers and crying silent tears. She'd broken the rules. She'd told someone. And in her 7-year-old mind, she was certain there would be consequences. What Emma didn't know was that help was already on its way, and her situation was about to change. But first, the full truth of what had been happening in the Hartley household would need to be understood. Within 20 minutes, the small nurse's office had transformed into a hub of careful, coordinated activity. 2 police officers arrived first, Officer Maria Santos and Officer James Park, both specially trained in handling delicate family situations involving children. They entered quietly, moving slowly and deliberately so as not to startle Emma. Their uniforms made them look official and authoritative, but their faces were kind, their eyes warm with concern rather than judgment. Officer Santos was a veteran of 15 years on the force, with 3 children of her own. She'd worked countless cases involving children in difficult situations, and she'd learned how to make herself appear less intimidating, how to speak in a way that invited trust rather than fear. Officer Park was newer to this specialized unit, but had a natural gentleness about him that made children feel safe. "Hi, Emma," Officer Santos said, pulling up a chair and sitting so she was at Emma's eye level rather than towering over her. "My name is Maria, and this is my partner James. We're here to make sure you're safe. I want you to know right away that you're not in any trouble at all, not even a little bit. Actually, you were very brave to tell Nurse Morrison the truth. That took a lot of courage." Emma looked between the officers and Sarah, her small hands gripping the edge of the examination table. Her eyes were red from crying, and she still held a half-eaten cracker. "Are you going to make me go home?" Her voice was so small, so frightened. Emma looked between the officers and Sarah, uncertainty written across her features. Her small hands gripped the edge of the examination table so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her eyes were red from crying, and she still held a half-eaten cracker in one trembling hand. "Is Melissa coming?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper, laden with a fear that made all 3 adults' hearts constrict. "No," Officer Park said firmly but gently, leaning forward slightly. "Your stepmom isn't coming here. We're going to make sure of that. Right now, we just want to talk to you and make sure you're feeling better." "But I broke the rules," Emma said, tears spilling over again. "I wasn't supposed to tell anyone. Melissa says what happens at home stays at home. She says people won't understand, that they'll think I'm ungrateful, that I'll get in trouble for complaining." Officer Santos reached out slowly, telegraphing her movement, and gently touched Emma's hand. "Emma, sweetheart, I need you to hear this very clearly, okay? You didn't break any rules that matter. The things Melissa told you, about not telling people, about being ungrateful, those weren't real rules. Those were things she said to scare you into staying quiet. Real rules are things that keep people safe and healthy. What you did today by telling Nurse Morrison, that was exactly the right thing to do. You might have saved your own life." Emma absorbed this, her young mind trying to process information that contradicted everything she'd been taught for months. "Am I really allowed to eat more than once a week?" The question hung in the air, so innocent and yet so devastating that Sarah had to turn away for a moment to compose herself. Officer Park's jaw clenched, and Officer Santos had to take a breath before answering. "Yes, baby," Officer Santos said, her voice thick with emotion she was trying to keep under control for Emma's sake. "You're absolutely allowed to eat every single day, multiple times a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. That's normal. That's how growing children are supposed to eat. What was happening to you was not normal, and it was not your fault." An ambulance arrived shortly after, pulling into the school's circular driveway with lights flashing but no siren. A deliberate choice to avoid frightening Emma more than necessary. 2 paramedics entered the nurse's office, both women who specialized in pediatric care. The lead paramedic, whose name tag read Chen, approached with a warm smile and a rolling medical bag. "Hi there, Emma. I'm paramedic Chen, no relation to your teacher, and this is my partner Amy. We're going to take a look at you and make sure everything's working properly, okay? Think of us like mechanics but for people instead of cars." Emma managed a tiny smile at that. "My daddy's car broke down once, Did it? Well, we're going to make sure you're running much better than a broken-down car, Amy said cheerfully, pulling out medical equipment. I'm going to put this little thing on your finger. It's called a pulse ox, and it tells us how your heart is doing. It doesn't hurt at all. It's actually kind of cool because it glows red. The paramedics worked efficiently but unhurriedly, checking Emma's vital signs, asking gentle questions about how she felt, explaining everything they were doing before they did it. They gave her small amounts of an electrolyte solution to drink, monitored her response, and communicated quietly with each other using medical terminology. Emma couldn't understand but found oddly comforting. It meant they knew what they were doing. Your heart is doing great, Chen told Emma. It's working exactly like it should. You're going to be just fine. We are going to take you to the hospital, though, just so the doctors there can check on you more thoroughly. It's like, if your dad's car was making a weird noise, he wouldn't just ignore it, right? He'd take it to someone who could look at everything carefully. That's what we're doing with you. Will it hurt? Emma asked, her voice small. The hospital visit? No, sweetheart. The doctors will want to check you over, maybe give you some fluids through a small tube in your arm, like watering a plant that needs a drink. That part might pinch for just a second, but then it doesn't hurt at all. And the best part? Hospital beds are really comfortable, and they usually have those cool remote controls where you can make the bed go up and down. Emma considered this. Can I bring my backpack? Sarah handed Emma her small purple backpack, which had been sitting in the nurse's office since she'd arrived. Of course, honey. You can bring anything you want. What about school? I have a spelling test tomorrow. Will I be in trouble for missing it? Or Mrs. Chen, who had stayed nearby throughout the entire ordeal, stepped forward and crouched beside Emma. Emma, sweetheart, you don't have to worry about the spelling test. You're not in trouble for missing school. Your only job right now is to let these nice people take care of you. Everything else can wait. I promise. Will Daddy be there? Emma asked, her voice small. We're going to make sure your dad knows exactly where you are, Officer Santos promised. The situation unfolded with the careful coordination of professionals who understood that this was about more than just one afternoon. This was about a child's entire future. While Emma was being transported to the hospital in the ambulance, with Sarah Morrison accompanying her so she wouldn't be alone, Officers Santos and Park drove to the Hartley home in their patrol car. The Hartley residence was a well-maintained two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Neat lawns, trimmed hedges, houses that all looked similar in their middle-class comfort. The kind of neighborhood where people waved to each other while getting the mail, where children rode bikes on the sidewalks, where everything seemed normal and safe on the surface. It was exactly the kind of place where people never suspected what might be happening behind closed doors. Officer Santos rang the doorbell just after 2 in the afternoon. Robert Hartley answered within 30 seconds, dressed in business casual attire with his phone in one hand. Clearly he'd been working. He was a tall man in his mid-30s, with dark hair graying at the temples and the kind of exhausted look that spoke of too many late nights and early mornings. His expression shifted immediately from confusion to alarm when he saw the uniforms. Mr. Robert Hartley? Officer Santos asked, though she already knew the answer. Yes? Is everything all right? Is it Emma? His voice pitched higher with instant worry, his face draining of color. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor of the entryway. Your daughter is safe, but she's been taken to County General Hospital, Officer Park explained, his tone professional but not unkind. She became unwell at school today and needed medical attention. Unwell? What happened? Where's my wife? Melissa should have been notified. Robert grabbed his keys from the table by the door, his hands shaking. I need to go. I need to see her. Mr. Hartley, we're going to take you to the hospital, Officer Santos said, her voice taking on a gentler but more serious tone. But we need to speak with you about some things Emma told the school nurse today. It's important, and we need you to listen carefully. Things? What things? I don't understand. Robert looked between the two officers, his confusion evident and genuine. Is Emma hurt? Did someone hurt her at school? Your daughter wasn't hurt at school, Officer Park said carefully. But we need to discuss the situation at home. During the drive to the hospital, we'd like to ask you some questions. Is that all right?" Robert's face showed a mix of confusion, fear, and dawning realization that something was very wrong. Something beyond a simple medical emergency. Yes, of course. Whatever you need. I need to see Emma. I need to know she's okay." During the drive to County General, which took about 15 minutes through afternoon traffic, the officers asked their questions. They were careful questions, strategic questions, designed to understand what Robert knew and didn't know. How often did Emma eat at home? Who prepared the meals? Did Robert ever notice Emma seeming particularly hungry? Had he noticed any changes in Emma's appearance or behavior? What was Emma's relationship like with her stepmother? How involved was Robert in the day-to-day care of his daughter? With each question, Robert's responses painted a picture of a father who had been present in body, but absent in attention. He worked from home 3 days a week and traveled for work the other 2 days. Melissa handled most of the household management, including meals. He usually ate breakfast early before Emma woke up, often worked through lunch, and had dinner with the family on the evenings he was home. But now that the officers were asking, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually seen Emma eat a full meal. "She always said she'd already eaten," Robert said, his voice growing quieter as pieces began clicking into place. Horrible pieces he didn't want to see, forming a horrible picture. Melissa would say Emma had eaten earlier, or that Emma wasn't hungry, or that Emma was being picky. I believed her. I trusted her. Oh, God. He pressed his hands to his face, realization washing over him in cold waves. "How bad is it? How bad is Emma? Please, you have to tell me." "Your daughter is being evaluated at the hospital," Officer Santos said. "But Mr. Hartley, Emma told the school nurse that she only eats 1 meal per week, on Sundays. She said your wife told her that was enough, that asking for more food was greedy and ungrateful." The patrol car swerved slightly as Robert made a sound like all the air had been punched from his lungs. "Once a week? That's impossible. I would have known. I would have seen." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't impossible. He'd been so focused on work, so caught up in his own life, so willing to let Melissa handle everything domestic. He'd been willfully blind, and his daughter had paid the price. "When we arrive at the hospital, you'll be able to see Emma," Officer Park said. "But Mr. Hartley, you need to prepare yourself. Your daughter is going to need significant help to recover from this. And there are going to be a lot of questions, from doctors, from Child Protective Services, from us. We need to understand the full picture of what's been happening in your home." Robert nodded numbly, staring out the window without seeing anything. His mind was racing through memories, reinterpreting everything through this new, horrifying lens. Emma's clothes hanging loose, the way she'd grown so quiet, how she'd stopped asking him to play with her, to read her stories, to spend time together. He'd thought she was just getting older, becoming more independent. He'd thought she was still processing grief from losing her mother. He'd thought a lot of things, and apparently all of them had been catastrophically wrong. At the hospital, Emma lay in a pediatric room on the 3rd floor, in a bed that seemed far too large for her small frame. She was connected to an IV line that delivered fluids and carefully measured nutrients her body desperately needed, but had to receive slowly, cautiously. The pediatric ward had done its best to make the room cheerful. There were colorful murals of animals on the walls, stuffed toys on a shelf, a television mounted in the corner playing cartoons on mute. But nothing could fully mask the clinical reality of the medical equipment surrounding her. Sarah Morrison had stayed with Emma during the ambulance ride and through the initial hospital admission, holding her hand, explaining what was happening, making sure Emma didn't feel abandoned in this unfamiliar place. Now Sarah sat in a chair beside the bed, showing Emma pictures on her phone of her own children, telling funny stories to distract Emma from her worry. When Robert rushed through the door, his face pale and his eyes wild with fear and guilt, Emma's face crumpled. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to tell. I didn't mean to get anyone in trouble. Please don't be mad." The words tumbled out in a rush, panicked and desperate, as Emma tried to sit up despite the IV line. Robert fell to his knees beside her bed, taking her small hand in his larger one, careful not to disturb the IV. Tears were already streaming down his face. He didn't even try to hide them. "Emma, baby, you're not in trouble. You didn't do anything wrong. I promise. I'm not mad at you. I could never be mad at you for this." "But Melissa said—" "Whatever Melissa said doesn't matter right now." Robert's voice cracked, broke, reassembled itself. "What matters is that you're safe. You're here, you're getting help, and you're safe. I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry I failed you." Emma stared at her father, trying to process his words, his tears. This version of him she rarely saw. Emotional, present, fully focused on her. "You're not going to send me away? Because I caused trouble?" The question pierced Robert like a knife between his ribs. "Send you away?" "Emma, no. Never. You're my daughter. You're the most important person in my entire world. I'm never sending you away. From now on, it's you and me, kid. We're a team. I promise you, I swear to you, I'm going to do better. I'm going to be the dad you deserve." "What about Melissa?" Emma's voice was small, frightened, the name itself seeming to carry weight and shadow. "Melissa is not coming back," Robert said firmly, squeezing Emma's hand gently. "Ever. She's going to face consequences for what she did to you. And I'm going to make absolutely certain you're safe. I'm going to protect you the way I always should have been protecting you." Emma studied her father's face, searching for truth, for sincerity, for safety. And then, slowly, tentatively, she leaned toward him. Robert gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of the IV, mindful of how fragile she felt, and held his daughter while she cried. Not the quiet, fearful tears she'd been crying for months. Real sobs, deep and wrenching, the kind that came from some place that had been locked away and was finally safe enough to be opened. Robert held her and cried too, mourning the time they'd lost, the suffering she'd endured, the father he should have been, but wasn't. He breathed in the scent of her hair. When had it started smelling different? Less like children's shampoo and more like nothing at all. And made silent promises to his daughter, to himself, and to the memory of Catherine, Emma's mother, who he'd failed by failing their child. Sarah Morrison quietly excused herself, giving them privacy, but not before squeezing Robert's shoulder in a gesture that said both, "I'm here if you need me, and you need to make this right." She stepped into the hallway where Officers Santos and Park waited along with Dr. Amanda Chen, the pediatrician overseeing Emma's case. Dr. Chen was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. She'd been practicing pediatric medicine for 15 years, with a specialty in complex cases. She'd seen many difficult situations, but cases involving deliberate deprivation always affected her deeply. She gestured for everyone to move down the hallway, out of earshot of Emma's room. "Let's talk about Emma's condition," Dr. Chen said, pulling out a tablet with Emma's charts and test results. "I need to be direct with all of you. What's been happening to this child is severe. She's significantly underweight. She should weigh approximately 52 pounds at her age and height. She weighs 36. Her body is showing signs of extended nutritional deficit. Her blood work reveals deficiencies in multiple vital nutrients. Her muscle mass is depleted. Her hair and nails show signs of malnutrition. Her growth has likely been impacted." The adults listened with grim expressions as Dr. Chen continued, her voice professional but tinged with anger she was working to control. "The good news, if we can call it that, is that Emma is stable. We're providing careful nutritional support through IV, and we'll be monitoring her closely as we begin reintroducing solid foods. The concern with someone in her condition is something called refeeding syndrome, which can happen if you give too much nutrition too quickly to someone whose body has adapted to deprivation. We need to go slowly and carefully." "How long will she need to be in the hospital?" Officer Santos asked. "At least 5 days, possibly longer, depending on how she responds to treatment. We need to monitor her heart, her electrolytes, her kidney function. We need to establish a safe feeding plan. And honestly, we need to make sure she's going to a safe environment when she's discharged." Dr. Chen looked directly at Robert, who'd emerged from Emma's room and was standing in the hallway looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Mr. Hartley, I need to ask you directly. Did you know your daughter was only eating once per week?" "No." Robert's voice was raw. "I didn't know. I should have known. I lived in the same house. I saw her every day, but I didn't know. I was working, traveling, distracted. I trusted Melissa too. God, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a terrible father." "The question now isn't about blame," Dr. Chen said, though her expression suggested she had opinions on that topic. "The question is what happens moving forward." Child Protective Services has been notified and will be involved. Emma is going to need intensive support: medical, nutritional, and psychological. This kind of situation doesn't just affect a child physically. The emotional and psychological impacts are significant. Emma's been living in fear and deprivation, in an environment where she was taught that her most basic needs were wrong to have. That's going to take time and professional help to heal. "I'll do whatever it takes," Robert said. "Whatever Emma needs. Therapy, doctors, anything. I'll quit my job if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." "That's good to hear," Dr. Chen said, "because Emma is going to need you to show up, consistently and completely, in ways you apparently haven't been doing. Children who have experienced what Emma has experienced need safety, consistency, and unwavering support. They need adults they can trust to keep them safe. Can you be that for your daughter?" "Yes," Robert said without hesitation. "I can. I will. I have to be." The investigation at the Hartley home began while Robert was still at the hospital with Emma. A team of 4 officers, along with a specialist from Child Protective Services named Janet Torres, arrived with a search warrant. Janet was a veteran caseworker with 20 years of experience, someone who'd seen more than her share of difficult situations but still approached each case with determination to protect children and find the truth. The house from the outside looked like a picture of suburban normalcy: neat landscaping, a 2-car garage, Halloween decorations already beginning to appear on the porch. Inside, the main living areas continued this appearance of comfortable middle-class life. Nice furniture, family photos on the walls, though Janet noticed that more recent photos seemed to feature Robert and Melissa without Emma, while older photos showed Robert and Emma with a woman who must have been Emma's late mother, Catherine. But as they moved deeper into the house, the facade began to crack. The kitchen was spacious and well-appointed, with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The refrigerator was a large French door model, and when Officer Santos opened it, she found it fully stocked with fresh groceries: milk, eggs, cheese, vegetables, fruit, lunch meat, condiments, everything a normal family would need. But hanging from the refrigerator handle was something that made her blood run cold: a combination padlock. "Take photos of everything," Janet instructed, pulling out her own camera. "Document the lock, the position, everything." As they continued investigating, they found another refrigerator in the garage, also locked. The pantry and the kitchen had standard groceries, but a closer inspection revealed something disturbing. All the food that would appeal to a child: granola bars, crackers, cookies, juice boxes, was stored on the highest shelves, well out of reach of a 7-year-old. The lower shelves held items like cleaning supplies and paper products. In the formal dining room, the table was set beautifully, as if ready for dinner guests. But in Emma's bedroom, a small room at the end of the upstairs hallway, they found a space that told a different story. The room was neat but sparse: a twin bed with a thin comforter, a small desk with school supplies organized carefully, a bookshelf with some books, though fewer than you'd expect for a child Emma's age. The closet held uniforms and a few casual clothes, all hanging loosely on hangers, all a size or two too large now for the child they'd been purchased for. But it was what they found in Melissa's home office that provided the most damning evidence. Melissa kept a journal, a neat leather-bound book that sat on her desk in plain sight. Inside, written in precise handwriting, was a log that made even experienced investigators feel ill. Dates, days of the week, notes about meals, specifically notes about Emma's single weekly meal on Sundays, weights recorded each Monday, observations about Emma's compliance and lessons learned, complaints about Emma's manipulative attempts to obtain food, references to teaching discipline and gratitude. "This is unbelievable," Janet said, her voice shaking slightly as she photographed each page. She documented everything. She tracked it like it was a project. They found more. Receipts showing Melissa regularly purchased groceries, disproving any claim of financial inability to feed the child. Text messages on a tablet left in the office. Messages between Melissa and a friend where she complained about Emma being difficult and needy, and expressed satisfaction that her new system was teaching her some discipline. Browser history showing she'd researched information about food restriction, though the specific nature of what she'd looked up painted a picture of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and was planning carefully. In the basement, they found additional locked storage, containers of non-perishable foods, all secured with padlocks. It was as if Melissa had gone out of her way to ensure that even if Emma had been desperate enough to search for food, she wouldn't have been able to find it. Officer Park, a father of two himself, stood in Emma's sparse bedroom and felt rage building in his chest. Rage he had to control because they had a job to do and had to do it by the book. How does someone live in a house with a 7-year-old child, see them every single day, and deliberately withhold food? How does a human being do this? "The same way people do any form of mistreatment," Janet said quietly, carefully bagging evidence. "They dehumanize the victim. They justify their actions. They convince themselves they're teaching lessons or maintaining control. In cases like this, the perpetrator often views the child as property to be controlled, rather than a person with needs and rights." They continued their methodical documentation of everything. Every locked refrigerator, every cabinet, every page of the journal, every text message, every photograph on the walls that showed how Emma had changed over time, how the smiles had faded, how the child in recent photos looked more like a shadow of herself. The timeline was damning. According to the journal, Melissa had implemented her system gradually starting in August, about 8 weeks ago. At first, it had been reducing snacks between meals. Then, teaching Emma to wait patiently for dinner. Then, limiting meals to teach gratitude. The progression was clear, documented in Melissa's own handwriting, showing premeditation and escalation. When Melissa returned home that evening, she arrived to find police cars in her driveway and officers waiting for her. She stepped out of her car, a nice sedan, expensive, with shopping bags in hand. She'd apparently been at the mall. "Melissa Hartley?" Officer Santos approached, her badge visible. "Yes? What's going on? Why are police at my house?" Melissa's expression shifted from confusion to carefully controlled neutrality, but in her eyes, something calculating flickered. "Mrs. Hartley, we have a warrant to search your home in connection with an investigation involving your stepdaughter, Emma. We're also placing you under arrest." "Arrest? This is absurd. What are the charges?" Melissa's voice remained calm, but her hands tightened on her shopping bags. "Endangering the welfare of a child, reckless endangerment, and unlawful restraint. You have the right to remain silent." As Officer Santos continued reading Miranda rights, Melissa's expression cycled through several emotions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally settling on a mask of indignation. "This is Emma's doing, isn't it? That manipulative little girl has been lying about me since I married Robert. She's never accepted me. She makes up stories for attention. Whatever she told you is a lie designed to get me in trouble. Mrs. Hartley, I'd advise you to stop talking," Officer Park said. "Anything you say can and will be used against you." "I haven't done anything wrong," Melissa insisted as they placed handcuffs on her wrists. "I've been trying to teach her responsibility and gratitude. She's spoiled and difficult. She needed structure and discipline. Robert was too soft on her after Catherine died. Someone had to teach her proper behavior." The officers exchanged glances. Suspects often made things worse by talking, but Melissa seemed determined to justify her actions, even as she was being arrested. As they led her to the patrol car, Janet Torres stood in the doorway of the house, holding the journal they'd found, and felt a deep satisfaction. They had everything they needed: Melissa's own documentation, the physical evidence of the locks, Emma's medical records from the hospital, and now Melissa's own statements essentially admitting to restricting food as discipline. This case would be prosecuted. Melissa wouldn't be able to hurt Emma again. Emma stayed in the hospital for 7 days. 7 days that became a turning point, a bridge between the nightmare she'd been living and the possibility of something better. The first 48 hours were the most critical medically. Dr. Chen and her team monitored Emma constantly. Her heart function, her electrolyte levels, her kidney function, every system in her body that had been stressed by prolonged inadequate nutrition. The fourth continued delivering carefully measured fluids and nutrients. They introduced small amounts of food, starting with clear broths and gelatin, then adding crackers, then soft foods like yogurt and oatmeal. Every addition was monitored, every response noted. Robert stayed by Emma's bedside almost constantly. He'd brought a change of clothes, toiletries, his laptop for the work he was trying to maintain, though his focus was fractured. But mostly, he just stayed present. He read to Emma from books he'd brought from her room at home. He watched cartoons with her. He held her hand when she had nightmares. He was learning, slowly and painfully, how to be the father he should have been all along. Sarah Morrison, the school nurse who'd first recognized Emma's distress, visited twice during the hospital stay. She brought homework from Mrs. Chen so Emma wouldn't fall behind, though everyone agreed the homework wasn't the priority right now. She also brought something else, a stuffed animal, a soft gray cat, which she said was from all the staff at Riverside Elementary. "Everyone at school is thinking about you," Sarah told Emma during her second visit, sitting in the chair beside the hospital bed. "Mrs. Chen, the principal, the cafeteria staff, even the kids in your class. They all want you to know they care about you, and they can't wait to see you back at school when you're ready." Emma clutched the stuffed cat, her eyes welling with tears. "Are they mad at me? For causing problems? Mad at you?" "Emma, honey, no. Nobody is mad at you. You didn't cause problems. You survived something really difficult and now people want to help you heal. That's different." The hospital also brought in a child psychologist, Dr. Lisa Martinez, who specialized in working with children who'd experienced difficult situations. She visited Emma's room 3 times during the hospital stay, not for formal therapy sessions yet, but to begin building a relationship, to help Emma start processing what had happened in age-appropriate ways. Dr. Martinez was a warm woman in her late 40s with curly hair and an easy smile. She didn't wear a white coat like the medical doctors, instead dressing in colorful cardigans and comfortable pants. She brought art supplies, crayons, markers, paper, and introduced herself as someone who helps kids talk about hard things. "Sometimes talking is easier when you're doing something with your hands," Dr. Martinez explained, sitting on the floor beside Emma's bed with paper spread out. "So we can draw while we talk. Or we can draw instead of talking. Whatever feels right for you." Emma, who'd been hesitant at first, found herself relaxing as she colored. Dr. Martinez didn't ask scary questions. She asked about school, about books Emma liked, about the stuffed cat Sarah had brought. Slowly, gently, she asked about home. "Your dad seems really worried about you," Dr. Martinez observed. "He's been here a lot." Emma nodded, carefully coloring inside the lines of a flower she'd drawn. "He says he's sorry he didn't notice what was happening. How does that make you feel?" "When he says that?" Emma considered, her crayon pausing. "Confused. Because I thought I was supposed to be the one who was sorry. That's what Melissa always said, that I should be sorry for being difficult and needy and ungrateful. But now your dad is saying he's sorry. So you're not sure who's supposed to be apologizing?" "Yeah." Emma's voice was small. "Emma, I'm going to tell you something really important, okay? What happened to you? Not having enough food, being told you couldn't ask for meals, being made to feel bad for being hungry. None of that was your fault. Not even a tiny bit. You were a kid being a normal kid with normal needs. The grown-ups around you were supposed to take care of those needs. When they didn't, that was their failure, not yours." Emma absorbed this, her young mind working to reconcile this new information with the narrative she'd been living with for months. But Melissa said things that weren't true. Sometimes grown-ups say untrue things to kids to make themselves feel better or to control situations. It doesn't mean those things were right or fair or your fault. These conversations, brief and gentle, planted seeds. They wouldn't fix everything overnight. But they began the process of helping Emma understand that she wasn't the problem, that her needs weren't wrong, that what had happened to her wasn't something she'd deserved or caused. Meanwhile, Janet Torres from Child Protective Services worked with Robert to develop a safety plan for Emma's discharge. There would be regular check-ins, both at home and at her office. Robert would need to demonstrate he could provide a safe, stable, nurturing environment. Emma would need ongoing medical monitoring, nutritional counseling, and therapy. They discussed Robert's work situation. He committed to reducing his hours and eliminating travel for the foreseeable future. They discussed who would be available to support them. Robert's sister offered to help, as did several friends who were horrified to learn what had been happening. "The goal here isn't to punish you, Mr. Hartley," Janet explained during one of their meetings in a hospital conference room. "The goal is to ensure Emma's safety and support her recovery. You were living in the same house where this was happening. That's a serious failure of supervision and protection, but you also appear to be genuinely shocked by what was happening, and you're taking immediate steps to address it. If you follow through, if you truly commit to being the parent Emma needs, then we can work together to keep Emma with you. But understand that we'll be watching carefully. Emma's welfare is our priority." "I understand," Robert said, his voice heavy. "I want to do this right. I have to do this right. Emma deserves a father who sees her, who protects her, who puts her first. I'm going to be that father." By day 4 of Emma's hospital stay, she was eating regular meals. Small portions, carefully monitored, but regular meals 3 times a day plus snacks. Her body was responding well to the refeeding process. Color was returning to her cheeks. She had more energy. She smiled occasionally, tentative smiles that broke Robert's heart and gave him hope in equal measure. On day 6, Dr. Chen sat down with both Emma and Robert to discuss discharge planning. "Emma, you've done really well here," Dr. Chen said, perching on the end of the hospital bed. "Your body is healing. You're eating well. You're getting stronger. We're going to send you home tomorrow." Emma's eyes widened with something that looked like fear. "Home? Not to your old house," Robert interjected quickly. "We're not going back there. We're moving to a new apartment. A fresh start for both of us. Just you and me, kiddo." Emma processed this. "No Melissa? No Melissa? Never again. Just us." Dr. Chen continued. "Emma, you're going to need to keep seeing doctors for a while to make sure you stay healthy. And you're going to see Dr. Martinez, the psychologist you've been talking to regularly. She's going to help you work through some of the hard things that happened. Your dad is also going to be learning how to help you, how to make sure you always have enough to eat, how to make sure you feel safe." "Can I go back to school?" Emma asked. "To Mrs. Chen's class?" "Soon. We want you to have a week or so at home first, getting used to your new routine. But yes, you'll go back to school. Your teachers and Nurse Morrison will all be there to support you." That night, Emma's last night in the hospital, Robert tucked her into the hospital bed and sat beside her. "Emma, I want to make you a promise," he said. "From now on, you will always have enough to eat. Always. If you're hungry, you can eat. We'll have breakfast together every morning. We'll have dinner together every night. We'll keep snacks you like in the house, and you can have them whenever you want. You will never, ever have to wonder where your next meal is coming from. Do you understand?" Emma looked at him with those 2 old eyes. "What if I get greedy? What if I want too much?" "Emma, wanting food when you're hungry isn't greedy. That's your body telling you what it needs. And I want you to listen to your body. I want you to trust that there will always be more food. You don't have to save food or hoard food or worry about food. It will always be there. What if you change your mind?" Robert's eyes filled with tears. "I won't. I promise you, with everything I am, I will not change my mind. You're my daughter. Taking care of you. Really taking care of you. Making sure you have everything you need. That's my job and my privilege. I love you, Emma. I should have shown you that better before. I'm going to show you that every day from now on." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, very quietly, she said, I love you too, Daddy. It was the first time she'd said those words in months. Robert held her hand and cried, and Emma cried with him, and something began to heal in that hospital room on Emma's last night there. Something that would take a long time to fully mend, but that had finally started the process of healing. 6 months passed. 6 months of rebuilding, of healing, of learning what it meant to be a family again. 6 months that transformed both Emma and Robert in ways that were sometimes painful, often difficult, but ultimately hopeful. Robert had quit his demanding corporate job and taken a position with a different company. Better hours, no travel, lower pay, but infinitely more important. They'd moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex with a playground, closer to Emma's school. The apartment was modest but filled with light, with Emma's artwork taped to the refrigerator, with family photos that Robert was determined to build, new memories to replace the old ones. The refrigerator itself, no locks, always accessible, always stocked, became a symbol of their new life. Every morning, Robert made sure Emma saw him check the fridge, saw him plan meals, saw him put her favorite snacks where she could reach them. Every evening they cooked dinner together, simple meals at first as they both learned, but meals they shared and talked over. Therapy became a central part of their routine. Emma saw Dr. Martinez twice a week initially, then once a week as she progressed. The sessions helped Emma process what had happened, helped her understand that having needs wasn't wrong, that asking for things wasn't greedy, that she deserved care and safety and love. I made something for you, Emma told Dr. Martinez during one session about 3 months into therapy. She pulled out a drawing she'd done at home. 2 figures, clearly meant to be her and Robert, sitting at a table with plates of food in front of them. Both figures were smiling. The sun in the corner was bright yellow, and there were flowers around the border. Tell me about your picture, Dr. Martinez said, admiring it. That's me and Daddy having dinner. We have spaghetti on Tuesdays. It's our tradition now. And see, Emma pointed to the plates. We both have full plates, and I'm smiling because I'm not scared of the food anymore. Well, mostly not scared. Mostly not scared is really good progress, Emma. What makes you still a little scared sometimes? Emma thought about it. Sometimes I worry that it's going to stop. That one day Daddy will say we can't afford food anymore, or that I've been eating too much, or that I don't deserve dinner. My brain knows that's not going to happen, but my tummy gets worried anyway. That makes so much sense. Your tummy learned to be worried for a long time. It's going to take a while to unlearn that. But you know what's amazing? You're able to tell the difference between what your brain knows is true and what your tummy worries about. That's really mature and shows you're healing. Robert had his own therapy too, separate sessions with a different counselor who specialized in helping parents who'd failed their children learn to do better. Those sessions were hard, forcing Robert to confront uncomfortable truths about himself, how he'd used work to avoid dealing with his grief over Catherine, how he'd abdicated parenting responsibilities, how he'd ignored warning signs because addressing them would have been inconvenient or uncomfortable. I keep thinking about all the moments I could have noticed, Robert told his counselor during one session. The parent-teacher conference where Mrs. Chen tried to express concerns. The times Emma said she wasn't hungry. The fact that her clothes were getting looser. How did I miss all of it? Because you weren't present, his counselor said gently but firmly. You were physically there, but emotionally checked out. The question now isn't how you missed it. You know how. The question is, how do you ensure you never check out again? Robert took that question seriously. He created structures and routines to keep himself accountable. Daily check-ins with Emma about her day, her feelings, her needs. Weekly meal planning done together so Emma could see the food that would be available. Monthly meetings with Janet Torres from CPS to review how things were going. Regular appointments with Emma's pediatrician to monitor her continued recovery. He set reminders on his phone for everything, not because he needed the reminders anymore, but because the act of creating them reminded him daily that this was his priority, his responsibility, his privilege. Emma's physical recovery was remarkable. Within 3 months, she'd gained 8 pounds, reaching a healthy weight for her age and height. Her hair grew shinier, thicker. Her skin lost its pale, papery quality. She had energy to run and play. She joined the school choir and discovered she had a lovely singing voice. She made a best friend named Sophie who lived in their apartment building, and they spent hours together doing homework, playing games, making up elaborate imaginary worlds. But the emotional recovery was slower, more complicated, with setbacks that reminded them all that healing isn't linear. There were still hard days. Days when Emma woke up crying, convinced she'd done something wrong and wouldn't be allowed to eat. Days when she'd panic if dinner was delayed by even 15 minutes, anxiety spiraling as old fears resurfaced. Days when she'd ask Robert over and over if he was sure it was okay to have seconds, if she wasn't eating too much, if he wasn't going to send her away for needing things. On those days, Robert would sit with Emma, hold her if she'd let him, and remind her of the truth as many times as she needed to hear it. You can always eat when you're hungry. Always, always, always. There is plenty of food in this house. You're not being too much. You are not a burden. You are my daughter, and taking care of you is not just my responsibility. It's my joy. I love feeding you. I love watching you get stronger and happier. You're not going anywhere except forward into being healthy and strong. The routine helped. The consistency helped. The visible evidence of food always being available helped. Slowly, gradually, Emma's anxiety about meals decreased. She started to trust that breakfast would happen every morning, that lunch would be at school, that dinner would be every evening, that snacks were truly okay to have whenever she wanted them. She also started to trust Robert again. Not blindly. She'd learned that lesson too well to ever trust blindly again. But she began to believe that this version of her father, this present and attentive version, was real and stable. She began to let herself be a kid again, in small ways at first, asking for help with homework, requesting specific meals she liked, saying when she was scared or sad or angry instead of hiding those feelings. About 4 months into their new life, Emma came home from school with a permission slip for a field trip to the science museum. She stood in the kitchen, holding the paper, chewing her lip in that way she did when she was anxious about something. "What's up, Emma Bean?" Robert asked, noticing her hesitation. "There's a field trip. To the science museum. We need to bring lunch that day. And there's a fee. It's $20. But if you can't afford it, that's okay. I don't have to go, it's not important." "Emma," Robert interrupted gently, crouching down to her level. "Stop. Take a breath. Do you want to go on the field trip?" Emma nodded, her eyes welling with tears she was trying to hold back. "Then you're going. $20 is fine, we can afford it. And we'll pack you a great lunch. What would you like? Sandwiches? Fruit? Cookies?" "Really?" Emma's voice was small, hopeful, disbelieving all at once. "Really? Emma, I need you to hear something. We're okay for money. I have a good job. We can afford food and field trips and school supplies and anything else you need. You don't have to worry about money. That's my job to worry about, not yours. Your job is to be a kid and do kid things like go on field trips and have fun. Okay?" Emma nodded, and then she did something she hadn't done in months. She threw her arms around Robert's neck and hugged him tight. "Thank you, Daddy." Robert hugged her back, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. These moments, these small, ordinary moments of a child asking to go on a field trip, of a parent saying yes, these were the moments he'd almost lost forever. These were the moments he'd never take for granted again. There were still difficult days, of course. Days when Emma woke up anxious, convinced something was wrong. Days when she needed extra reassurance that the food in the kitchen would still be there tomorrow. Days when old memories surfaced and she needed to process them with Dr. Kim or with Robert. "She's showing remarkable resilience," Dr. Kim told Robert during one appointment. "The transformation is beautiful to witness. You're doing excellent work as her father." But it wasn't all smooth. There were setbacks. Emma would occasionally panic if a meal was delayed, anxiety spiraling as old fears resurfaced. Or she'd ask Robert repeatedly if he was sure it was okay to have seconds, if she wasn't being too much, if he wasn't going to change his mind about keeping her. On those days, Robert would sit with Emma, hold her if she'd let him, and remind her of the truth as many times as she needed to hear it. You can always eat when you're hungry. Always. There is plenty of food in this house. You're not being too much. You're my daughter, and taking care of you isn't just my responsibility. It's my privilege and my joy. You're not going anywhere. We're family. Melissa's trial had been difficult. Robert had to testify, had to acknowledge publicly that he'd failed to see what was happening under his own roof. He'd watched the jury's faces fill with judgment and pity. Emma hadn't had to testify. The prosecution used her recorded conversations with investigators instead, sparing her the ordeal of facing Melissa in court. The evidence had been substantial. The documentation, the locked refrigerator, the medical records, Emma's own words. The jury deliberated briefly before returning guilty verdicts. 10 years, though it felt somehow both too severe and not enough. After the verdict, Robert had taken Emma out for ice cream. They'd sat in a small parlor decorated with cheerful colors and old-fashioned decor, Emma with a chocolate cone, Robert with vanilla. "It's over," Robert had said. "Melissa can never hurt you again. You're safe. I promise you're safe." Emma had looked at him with eyes that had seen too much difficulty for someone so young. "Do you really, really promise, Daddy? Because I don't think I could go through that again. I really, truly promise with everything I am. You're stuck with me now, kiddo. Forever." Emma had smiled then, a small but genuine smile. "I think that's good." Now, on a quiet Tuesday evening in their apartment, everything felt peaceful. Robert stood at the stove making spaghetti and meatballs, while Emma sat at the kitchen table working on math homework. The apartment smelled wonderful, garlic and tomato and Italian spices. Music played softly from Robert's phone. It was ordinary and domestic, and absolutely perfect in its simplicity. "Daddy?" Emma said, looking up from her worksheet. "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think Mommy knows about everything that happened?" Robert turned down the heat under the sauce and came to sit beside Emma at the table. They'd had versions of this conversation before, but it never got easier. "You mean your mom, Catherine?" Emma nodded, her pencil hovering over a division problem. "Do you think she knows about Melissa? Do you think she's upset with you?" Robert took a deep breath. "I think your mom knows everything. I think she's watching over both of us from heaven. And yeah, I think she was probably upset with me for a while. Really upset. Because she loved you more than anything, and she trusted me to take care of you. But you're taking care of me now," Emma pointed out. "I am. And I think your mom sees that. I think she sees me trying every single day, sees me showing up, sees me being the dad I always should have been. And I think she'd forgive me for that. I think she'd be proud of us both for working so hard to heal. Proud of me too, especially proud of you. You're so brave, Emma. You survived something really difficult, and you're still here, still trying, still being kind and sweet and wonderful. That takes incredible courage." Emma considered this thoughtful. "I miss her, Mommy Catherine, but I don't remember her as clearly as I used to. Sometimes I try really hard to remember her face and I can't. Is that wrong?" Robert's heart ached. "No, baby. That's not wrong at all. You were only 5 when she passed away. It's natural for memories to fade, especially for little ones. But you know what? You carry parts of her with you every day. Your smile is exactly like hers was. And that little thing you do when you're thinking really hard, where you wrinkle your nose. That's all Catherine. She's still with you. She's in you. I wish she was really here. Me too, Emma Bean. Every single day." They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment, Robert's hand resting gently on Emma's shoulder. Then Emma returned to her math problems, and Robert went back to the stove to finish dinner. These quiet, ordinary moments were what Robert treasured most now. The simple routines of family life. Homework and cooking and conversation. The rhythms he'd taken for granted before. The moments he'd nearly lost forever. His phone buzzed with a text from Janet Torres, their caseworker. "Monthly check-in scheduled for next Thursday at 4. Everything looks great in my notes. You're doing wonderful work with Emma. Keep it up." Robert smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. They were going to make it. It wouldn't always be perfect. There would be setbacks and hard days and moments when old fears resurfaced. but they were going to make it together. "Dinner's ready," Robert called, starting to serve generous portions of spaghetti onto plates. "Come get your plate, sweetheart." Emma bounded over, and Robert loaded her plate with pasta, meatballs, garlic bread, and a side salad. A healthy, normal portion. The kind of meal a growing child should have. "This is a lot of food," Emma observed, but she was smiling now, not worried. "That's because you're a growing girl who needs good nutrition for school and choir and playing with Sophie and all the things you love to do." Robert sat down across from her with his own full plate. "Enjoy." As they ate, Robert asked about Emma's day at school, what she was reading in her chapter book, what songs she was learning in choir. Normal dinnertime conversation. The kind that happens in millions of households every night. The kind Robert had almost destroyed through his inattention. He would never take these moments for granted again. Every meal together, every conversation, every laugh, every hug was a gift he'd nearly lost. Emma was going to be okay. It would take more time, more therapy, more patience and consistency and love. But she was going to be okay. They both were. And that was everything. The end.